You think discipline is just about trying harder? That's why you keep failing. You wake up motivated for 2 days, maybe 3, then you collapse like every other weak man who runs on emotion instead of structure. Discipline without a plan is nothing more than chaos wearing a confident mask. You don't lack effort, you lack direction. And direction is the difference between a man who dominates his life and a man who keeps restarting it. Let me break something most people are too soft to accept. Speaking in tongues isn't some mystical nonsense. It's what happens when your mind starts operating on a level your old identity can't even understand. It's the language of transformation. When your actions, habits, and thoughts stop aligning with your past weakness, it feels unfamiliar. It feels uncomfortable. That's because you're stepping into a version of yourself that your current mindset isn't equipped to handle. Weak men run from that confusion. Strong men build systems to control it. Discipline is not about waking up early or hitting the gym randomly. That's surface-level garbage. Real discipline is execution with precision. It's knowing exactly what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how it compounds. Without a plan, your discipline becomes noise. You're busy, but you're not progressing. You're moving, but you're not advancing. That's not power, that's delusion. A clear plan forces your mind into alignment. It removes hesitation, it eliminates decision fatigue. You don't wake up asking, "What should I do today?" That question alone proves you're already behind. A disciplined man with a plan wakes up and executes. No thinking, no debating, just action. That's control. That's authority over your own life. When you operate like this, your behavior starts to look foreign even to yourself. You stop recognizing the lazy version of you. You stop relating to average people. That's the real speaking in tongues. It's when your mindset evolves so aggressively that your old identity can't translate it anymore. You're no longer playing the same game. You're not even in the same league. Most people avoid this level because it requires brutal honesty. It forces you to admit you've been wasting time, that your effort was unstructured and weak, that your lack of results isn't bad luck, it's bad planning. And most men would rather protect their ego than face that truth. That's why they stay stuck. You think working harder automatically means you're winning. That's the lie that keeps most men trapped. You wake up early, push yourself, stay busy, and still end the day with nothing meaningful to show for it. That's not discipline. That's misdirected energy. And misdirected energy is dangerous because it creates the illusion of progress while quietly wasting your life. Being active is not the same as being effective. You can fill your entire day with tasks and still move nowhere. Without direction, effort becomes scattered. You jump from one thing to another, chasing urgency instead of importance. You convince yourself that motion equals progress, but in reality, you're just spinning in circles at a higher speed. The problem isn't your willingness to work. The problem is that your work has no clear destination. A man with no plan is easy to distract and impossible to respect. Every new idea pulls him in a different direction. Every small obstacle throws him off course. He reacts instead of executes. And because there's no structure behind his actions, he constantly resets. Day one, again and again. That cycle doesn't build strength, it builds frustration. Over time, that frustration turns into self-doubt, and self-doubt kills any chance of real dominance. Clarity changes everything. When you know exactly what you're working toward, your actions stop being random. Every move becomes intentional. Every hour has a purpose. You're no longer guessing your next step. You've already decided it. That level of control eliminates hesitation. It removes the mental noise that drains your focus. Instead of wasting energy deciding what to do, you direct all of it into execution. Most people underestimate how much energy they lose to indecision. Every time you pause to figure things out, you break momentum. Every time you question your next move, you weaken your authority over yourself. Discipline isn't just about forcing action. It's about eliminating unnecessary thinking. The clearer your plan, the less you need to rely on motivation or emotion. You don't need to feel ready. You just follow the structure you've already set. Without direction, even consistency becomes useless. You can repeat the wrong actions for years and still stay stuck. Consistency only works when it's aligned with a clear objective. Otherwise, you're just reinforcing mediocrity. That's why some people grind for years and never break through. They're disciplined, but they're disciplined in the wrong direction. That's a harsh truth most people refuse to face. A clear plan also exposes your excuses. When everything is defined, there's nowhere to hide. You either did the work or you didn't. There's no gray area, no emotional justification, no "I'll do it tomorrow." Structure forces accountability. It strips away the comfort of pretending. And that's exactly why most people avoid it. They'd rather stay vague and protect their ego than get specific and risk failure. Real discipline is precise. It's calculated, it's control. It doesn't rely on randomness or bursts of motivation. It operates like a system, predictable, repeatable, and efficient. When you build that system, your energy stops leaking into meaningless activity. It gets focused, sharpened, and directed toward outcomes that actually matter. If you're constantly busy but not advancing, you're not working hard, you're working wrong. And working wrong for long enough guarantees one thing: you'll end up exhausted, frustrated, and exactly where you started. Most men don't fail because they're incapable. They fail because they hesitate. They sit in that dangerous space between knowing and doing, stuck in endless micro decisions that drain their focus before they even begin. Every time you ask yourself, should I do this now or later? You've already weakened your position. That moment of hesitation is where discipline collapses. Not because you're lazy, but because you've left room for negotiation. A clear plan removes that negotiation entirely. It eliminates the option to debate with yourself. When your day is structured with precision, there's no internal argument. There's no space for excuses to sneak in. You don't wake up and decide to work out. It's already decided. You don't question whether you should focus or procrastinate. That decision was made long before the day started. And that's where real power begins, when action becomes automatic, not optional. Decision-making is one of the most underestimated sources of mental fatigue. Every choice you make consumes energy. What to do, when to do it, how to do it, these small decisions stack up until your mind is overloaded. By the time you reach something important, you're already mentally drained. That's why people default to comfort. Not because they want to fail, but because they've exhausted their ability to choose correctly. A structured plan cuts through that noise. It preserves your mental energy for execution instead of wasting it on constant thinking. Without a plan, your emotions take control. If you feel good, you work. If you don't, you delay. That's not discipline, that's dependency. You become a slave to your own mood. One bad day can throw you completely off track because there's no system holding you in place. But when your actions are predefined, emotions become irrelevant. You don't need to feel motivated, you just follow the structure. That's how high performers operate. They don't rely on how they feel. They rely on what's already been decided. Clarity also sharpens your identity. When you follow a clear plan consistently, you start to see yourself differently. You stop being someone who tries and become someone who executes. That shift is critical, because once your identity aligns with action, discipline becomes natural. You're no longer forcing yourself to do hard things. You expect it from yourself. And expectation is far more powerful than motivation. The absence of a plan creates chaos, and chaos breeds inconsistency. You start strong, then drift. You make progress, then stall. Not because you lack discipline, but because your system is unstable. It's built on temporary decisions instead of permanent structure. A clear plan stabilizes everything. It gives you a fixed path, so no matter how you feel or what distractions appear, you stay aligned. There's also a deeper level most people ignore. When you remove decision-making, you increase speed. You move faster because there's no delay between thought and action. You become efficient, direct, and focused. While others are still figuring out what to do, you're already halfway through executing. Over time, that speed compounds into massive advantage. Not because you're smarter, but because you're not wasting time thinking about what's already been decided. Most people resist this level of structure because it feels restrictive. They think they're losing freedom. In reality, they're avoiding responsibility. True freedom comes from control, not randomness. When your actions are guided by a clear plan, you're not limited, you're focused. And focus is what separates average effort from elite execution. If you still find yourself hesitating, delaying, or questioning your next move, the problem isn't your discipline. The problem is that you've left too many decisions open, and every open decision is an opportunity for weakness to take over. The moment things start feeling unfamiliar, most people assume something is wrong. That's their first mistake. They interpret confusion as a signal to stop, to slow down, to retreat back into what feels safe. But that discomfort you're trying to avoid is the exact evidence that something is changing. When your thoughts, habits, and reactions begin to feel foreign, it means your old identity is losing control. And instead of recognizing that as progress, most men panic and run straight back to what's comfortable. Comfort is predictable. It speaks a language you understand. You know how to act, how to think, how to exist inside it. But growth doesn't operate in that space. Growth forces you into unfamiliar territory where your previous patterns no longer apply. That's where the mental friction begins. You hesitate, you question yourself, you feel slightly out of sync. That's not weakness, that's transformation in motion. The problem is, without awareness, you misinterpret that signal and sabotage yourself. Think about it clearly. If you're trying to become someone more disciplined, more controlled, more dominant, why would it feel natural at the beginning? It wouldn't. Your current mindset was built on a different standard. So when you start acting outside of that standard, there's a disconnect. Your brain tries to pull you back into alignment with your old identity. It creates doubt, resistance, and hesitation. Not because you're incapable, but because you're changing faster than your mind is comfortable with. Weak men treat that resistance as a warning sign. They assume they're doing something wrong. So they stop, they retreat, they convince themselves they need more time, more preparation, more clarity. In reality, they just stepped into the exact space where growth happens and immediately backed out. That's why they stay the same year after year. They never push through the phase where things feel unfamiliar. Strong men see it differently. They recognize that confusion is part of the upgrade. Instead of running from it, they lean into it. They understand that the discomfort is temporary, but the transformation is permanent. So they keep executing. Even when it feels strange, even when it feels forced, over time, what once felt unnatural becomes their new baseline. That's how identity shifts happen. Not through comfort, but through repeated exposure to discomfort until it becomes normal. There's also a deeper layer most people ignore. That feeling of being out of sync is actually your mind trying to rebuild itself. Your old habits are losing relevance, and your brain is searching for a new pattern to stabilize around. If you stop during this phase, you reinforce the old pattern. If you continue, you allow the new one to form. It's a critical moment, and most people fail it because they don't understand what's happening. Discipline plays a massive role here. When you have a structured plan, you don't rely on how things feel. You follow the system regardless of internal resistance. That consistency forces your mind to adapt. It doesn't get a choice. Over time, the confusion fades, the resistance weakens, and the new behavior becomes automatic. What once felt like effort becomes your standard. Without that structure, you fall back into old habits the moment things get uncomfortable. You tell yourself you'll try again tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes with a different mindset. It comes with the same weakness, the same hesitation, the same patterns. And you repeat the cycle, thinking you're stuck, when in reality, you just keep quitting at the exact point where progress begins. The men who dominate are not the ones who avoid discomfort. They're the ones who understand it. They expect it. They use it as confirmation that they're moving in the right direction. While others are searching for clarity and comfort, they're building strength inside confusion, and that's why they separate themselves from everyone else. Most people are obsessed with effort. They measure their worth by how hard they feel they're working, how busy they look, how exhausted they are at the end of the day. That's the trap. Effort on its own means nothing. You can push yourself to the limit every single day and still remain average if that effort isn't structured. Activity without direction is just noise, and noise doesn't build power. It hides the fact that you're going nowhere. The difference between ordinary and dominant isn't how much you do. It's how precisely you do it. Structured effort takes your energy and compresses it into something sharp, something targeted, something effective. Instead of spreading yourself thin across distractions and random tasks, you channel everything into actions that actually move you forward. That's where power begins, when every move has intent behind it. Without structure, your effort is reactive. You respond to whatever appears in front of you. Messages, distractions, small tasks that feel urgent but don't matter. You convince yourself you're being productive because you're constantly doing something, but you're just reacting to your environment. There's no control in that. You're not leading your day, you're being dragged through it. And the more reactive you are, the weaker your position becomes. Structure flips that completely. It puts you in control. Instead of reacting, you dictate. You decide what gets your attention and what doesn't. You define your priorities in advance, so when distractions appear, they don't even register as options. They're irrelevant. That level of focus is rare, and it's exactly why it creates separation. Most people don't lack energy, they lack the discipline to direct it. When your effort is structured, it compounds. Each action builds on the last. There's continuity, momentum, and progress that stacks over time. You're not starting from zero every day. You're building something. That's the key difference. Random effort resets constantly. Structured effort accumulates, and accumulation is what turns small actions into massive results. There's also a psychological shift that happens when you operate this way. You stop chasing the feeling of productivity and start focusing on actual outcomes. You're no longer satisfied with being busy. You expect results. That expectation changes how you work. You become more intentional, more efficient, more ruthless with your time. You cut out anything that doesn't contribute to your objective. That's not extreme, that's necessary. Most people resist structure because it forces them to confront the truth about how they've been operating. It exposes wasted time, pointless habits, and weak priorities. It removes the comfort of saying, I tried, and replaces it with, I either executed or I didn't. That level of accountability is uncomfortable, so they avoid it. They prefer the illusion of effort over the reality of results. But if you're serious about control, you don't have that luxury. You can't afford to waste energy on things that don't matter. Every hour, every action, every decision has to serve a purpose. That's what structure enforces. It aligns your effort with your goals so tightly that progress becomes inevitable. And once you experience that level of alignment, you start to see how inefficient most people are. You realize they're not lacking ambition, they're lacking precision. They want results, but they refuse to organize their effort in a way that produces them. So they stay stuck, working harder and harder, wondering why nothing changes. Structured effort is not about doing more. It's about doing exactly what matters, with full intensity, in the right sequence over and over again. That's how power is built. Not through chaos, not through randomness, but through controlled, deliberate execution that leaves no room for wasted movement. Most people are trying to feel their way into a new identity. That's the fundamental mistake. They wait to feel confident before they act confident. They wait to feel disciplined before they act disciplined. They wait for some internal shift to happen first, as if identity magically changes and then behavior follows. That's not how it works. It's the opposite. Your identity is not built by what you feel, it's built by what you repeatedly do. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become a different man. There's no moment where everything clicks and your mindset transforms overnight. That idea is comforting, but it's false. Identity is constructed through systems, through patterns, through actions that are repeated so consistently that they start defining who you are. If your system is weak, your identity will always be unstable. If your system is strong, your identity becomes undeniable. Feelings are unreliable. They change constantly. One day you're motivated, the next day you're not. If your actions depend on that fluctuation, your results will be inconsistent. An inconsistent behavior creates a fragmented identity. You never fully become anything because you're always switching between states. One day disciplined, the next day distracted. One day focused, the next day lost. That inconsistency destroys any chance of building real authority over yourself. A system removes that instability. It creates a fixed structure that you follow regardless of how you feel. You don't ask yourself whether you're in the mood to work. You work because it's part of the system. You don't negotiate with your emotions. You override them. And that repetition starts to reshape your identity, not because you decided to change, but because your actions forced the change. Over time, something powerful happens. You stop seeing discipline as something you have to try. It becomes your default. You expect yourself to follow through. You expect yourself to execute. And when you don't, it feels wrong. Not because you're chasing motivation, but because it no longer aligns with who you've become. That's the shift most people never reach, because they never commit to a system long enough for it to take effect. There's also a level of honesty that comes with this approach that most people avoid. When your identity is tied to your system, you can't lie to yourself anymore. You can't say, I'm a disciplined person, if your actions don't reflect it. The system exposes the truth every single day. Either you followed it or you didn't. There's no emotional interpretation, no excuses, no narratives, just results. Most people prefer to protect their self-image instead of building it properly. They hold on to the idea of who they think they are instead of becoming that person through consistent action. They say they're focused, but their behavior is scattered. They say they're committed, but they quit when it gets uncomfortable. That gap between perception and reality is where weakness lives. A strong system closes that gap. It aligns what you do with who you claim to be. And once that alignment is consistent, your identity stops being a concept and becomes a fact. You're not trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined because your actions prove it daily. This is where real control comes from. Not from forcing yourself occasionally, not from bursts of motivation, but from building a structure that makes the right actions unavoidable. When your system is tight enough, there's no room for deviation. You don't drift. You don't hesitate. You don't rely on willpower. You execute. And the moment your execution becomes consistent, your identity follows without permission. It doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't wait for approval. It forms automatically, shaped by repetition, reinforced by discipline, and locked in by the system you chose to follow. Every time you wake up and don't know exactly what to do, you've already lost control of your day. That hesitation, that pause where you start thinking about your options, is where momentum dies. You tell yourself you're being flexible, that you're figuring things out in real time, but what you're actually doing is opening the door for distraction, delay, and weak decisions. Clarity isn't a luxury, it's a requirement, and without it, you're operating at a constant disadvantage. Most men live in this state without even realizing it. They rely on loose intentions instead of defined actions. They say things like, "I'll work on my goals today," or "I'll be productive," but those statements are vague and useless. When the moment comes to act, they're forced to decide what that actually means, and in that moment, uncertainty creeps in. They start weighing options, overthinking, and eventually choosing the easiest path instead of the right one. The problem with guessing your next move is that it turns every step into a decision point, and every decision point is an opportunity for failure. The more you have to think, the more chances you give yourself to hesitate. The more you hesitate, the easier it becomes to delay, and delay is the silent killer of progress. It doesn't feel like failure in the moment, but it compounds over time until you realize you've gone nowhere. A man who operates without a clear plan is constantly reacting to his environment. He checks his phone, responds to whatever appears, gets pulled into tasks that weren't even important to begin with. His day is dictated by external factors instead of internal control. And because there's no defined path, he convinces himself that whatever he's doing in the moment is good enough. That's how mediocrity maintains itself through constant low-level compromise. When your next move is already decided, everything changes. There's no gap between intention and action. You move immediately, without friction. You don't waste time thinking about alternatives because there are no alternatives. The path is set. That level of decisiveness creates speed, and speed creates advantage. While others are still figuring out where to start, you're already deep into execution. There's also a level of confidence that comes from this kind of clarity. Not the fake confidence that comes from motivation, but a grounded, controlled confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. You don't second guess yourself because there's nothing to question. The decision has already been made. And that certainty reflects in how you carry yourself, how you work, and how you respond to pressure. Most people avoid this because it forces them to confront their lack of structure. It removes the safety net of vagueness. When everything is clearly defined, you can't hide behind, "I'll do it later," or "I wasn't sure what to focus on." You either executed or you didn't. That level of accountability is uncomfortable, so they choose to stay in a state of constant guessing, where failure feels less obvious, but is still guaranteed. Guessing also destroys momentum. Every time you stop to figure out your next step, you break your flow. You lose rhythm, you lose focus, and restarting takes effort. That repeated stopping and starting drains your energy far more than consistent execution ever would. It's inefficient, and over time it wears you down. A structured approach eliminates that entirely. Your day flows from one action to the next without interruption. There's continuity, consistency, and direction. You're not wasting energy on decisions, you're investing it into execution. And that's where real progress happens. If you're still operating in a way where you're constantly deciding what to do next, you're not in control. You're reacting, adjusting, and hoping it works out. And hope is not a strategy. It's what people rely on when they don't have a plan strong enough to carry them forward. You want power? Then act like a man who deserves it. Build a plan so clear that failure becomes difficult. Structure your discipline so tightly that excuses don't even fit into your day. Stop relying on feelings. Feelings are for people who accept mediocrity. You're here to dominate, not negotiate with your own weakness. At the end of the day, discipline without a plan is a lie you tell yourself to feel productive. Real men don't guess. They design, execute, and conquer. If you're still drifting, still hoping, still trying, then understand this clearly. You're not lacking discipline. You're lacking control. And until you fix that, you'll keep talking like a winner while living like a loser.